welcome to Jet Coding. So this in today's tutorial, we're just going to touch on some AS6 modules and how to destructure, how to use the spread operator, because these are the things that comes up a lot when using some of the JavaScript libraries like React and all those things. Yeah. So I think it is a good place for us to learn how to destructure and how to use the spread operator and the rest operator, and also learn how to use some of the arrow, how to reduce function and make them arrow functions, right? Yes, because we see most of these stuffs in these frameworks like React and React Native and Redux and all these things. So I think even with data structure scratch, sometimes you can just do some destructuring, right? To just have access to some particular information. So we have here an object that you've already seen before in our previous tutorial. So we had an object called George, which had a name, an age, a gender, and is married, right? So now what is destructuring? So when you want to destructure an object, it's such a way that we don't have to, you see, right now, if I want to access the name, I'll just have to do something like this. Let me copy this. I'll just have to do something like George.name. If I want to know the age, I have to do George.age. Now this George is becoming very boring, right? So we just have to do George dot, right, the gender, right, which becomes very dry. So don't repeat yourself. So this method, dry, don't repeat yourself. Now you see that we are trying to repeat this George. It makes it very boring. So one way to do to go around it is to use the object destructuring, right? So object destructuring, right? So what we can do here is that we can just do const, right? Open a bracket, then assign this George object to it. Sorry. Assign this George object to it, right? This George object, so that we can now have access to the name, right? And have access to the age and have access to the gender, right? To the gender and have access to the is married. So that now we can just console.log, right? We can just console.log simply the name, right? And we have George, right? Instead of using George objects of George, that is very boring, right? So now, once we have destructured this, we can now use the name, right? Just like that, without any George dots. Now, so I'm trying to get rid of that dot notation, right? So when we destructure it, we have access to the individual properties in that object, right? Yes. So these are one of the things that you can use destructuring for. Instead of just calling the object before we access a property inside the function, inside that object, we can just destructure the object and just use their individual names like on it. So assuming we want to change this name, right, to let's say NA, we can just do this, right, and use let's say N, right? So in this case, when you call N, right, we still have the name George. And when you want to maybe call this, let's say G, to refer to as the gender, we can just call it G, right, capital G, and we have the gender, right? So this gives you like the flexibility to just do things very simply and effective, right? Other than accessing the objects, then calling the properties name using the dot notation, you can just destructure it, and you can even change the name of how you want to access it. So you can just use the colon and reassign a value to it. So assuming I want NM rather than N. So we can just do the NM in short, then we get the name. So this is destructuring in operation, right? In its nature. So now you are familiar with the structure, let's go on to the spread operator, right? So now the spread operator is one way to make it very easy for us to clone an object, right? So assuming we want to clone the George objects, right? How can we clone the George objects? Now, one way to clone the George object is just to use the object, the spread operator on that object, right? So we can just do const, right? Const, then we do, let's say, so let's do, no, George, let's say George clone, then we assign it to this. Then we use the spread operator. We use the dots, right? 3 dots. Then we call the object George on it, right? In that case, when we console.log, right, the George clone will have a reference to that George object. You see, we have simply cloned the George object using the spread operator, right? So now, one way that we can also use the spread operator, right, is just to do concatenation. So, right, let's do another one. Let's create another object and call it William, right? The William object, right? So let me copy this and do paste it there and just do objects, right? So let's do objects with William, right? William. And now, assuming that we want to concatenate these two objects together and make them one, right? The normal traditional way. So, right, let me console.log. Let me comment this. So now the original way to kind of go around this, right, is to use the concat method, right? Okay, so the normal traditional way for us to do this, right, is just to use the concat method. So we can just, what we can just do is just to do the objects, right? Maybe objects George. So let's do something like this. So we can just do, so in order for us to use the concat method, we have to make sure that our objects are in an array, right? An array. So let's place our objects in an array like this so that we can concat the two of them. Now we will see that our object has been concatenated together. So now we have two big objects in an array, right? So this is one object, this is another object, and they are all in the array, right? So you see that we also have,
comment that one out.
Yes, now we did something. Let me console that. Let me, yes, yeah, yes. So another way for us to go around it is just to do this, right? So we can just use an array, letters and numbers, then we can just use the alphanumeric, then we try to combine the two of them to get an alphanumeric, just as we see below here. Now, for us to use the spread operator, right? For us to use the spread operator, we can just, let me cut this. We can just paste this one here and just uncomment it, right? And now we see that we can just do this and also do, yeah, we spread the objects, right? William, is it William or William? Yeah. And let's comment this. Comment this. Okay. Now we see that what do we have? Array, right? Can just use an array and can just spread it here, right? Can just spread it. I think this should work. Yeah, this should work exactly. So Now you can spread and you can clone an object using the spread operator, and similarly to an array. So the spread operator is not limited to just an array, right? So now, assuming that I want to create an object here, right? Now look at how clean this starts to look. So let's call let's say name, let's call right, Dixon, right? Look at how clean you can just, with the spread operator, you can just add. Now this starts to look like how it will present, right? So let me call let's say an age, and I'll say maybe 20, and maybe is married, right? I'm just doing the same thing, right? Maybe I'll say true, and maybe I'll say the degree should be similar to maybe BSc, right? Now see how the object, now when you even look at this without anything, you just, if there is no any outputs, right? Assuming there was no outputs, right? You can start to think about how this would appear, right? So this is the power of the spread operator. Without even looking at the output, you can just look at how this will look like, would appear on your console, right? So this is the power of using the spread operator, right? So you can just spread. So now we can just also do this. We can do let's call this one const, and let's clone, let's say, let's call this clone 1, right? And just do objects and spread the objects, right? The objects William, comma, then let's add, let's say, a location, right? Location is equal to, let's say, Nigeria, right? So when I cut this off and I just call the clone.
Question and let's say contribution.
Okay.
So let's say when you have your data in an object, you can spread in an object.
Yeah.
When you have your data in an array, you spread in an array. Yeah. I think that's the simplest way we can.
Exactly. So you can, so one thing I should note is that you can spread in an object, and you can spread in an array.
That's right. Yeah.
Similarly, you can use the concat to just concat two objects or two array, right? But the object has to be in an array. So you can concat using just normal strings in array. You can concat using the objects. So before you can concat two objects, first of all, put them in an array before you can just concat.
Exactly.
Right. Now let's look at what you call the REST operator, right? What we call the REST operator.
REST. Hello.
Okay.
I have something to say about the concatenation of objects.
Okay.
I think if you are concatenating objects of the same properties, they overwrite. The properties will overwrite.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Yeah. Okay. So should
be different properties. Yes. We'll see how.
Okay. Yes. So yes. Okay. Let's remove this. They all have this, right? They all have
yes. We'll change the properties in the second.
So they all have this. So let's do location.
Okay.
It's equal to, let's say, Nigeria, and let's say
maybe occupation. You can add occupation, right?
Okay. So okay. Now let's they are both not in that. Okay.
One is an array, one is an object. Yeah.
So now let's spread. So
let's make objects.
Check the data.
Okay. So So let's make it object. So const objects, then we spread, right? The objects George, and we spread on the objects William. Right?
Yes.
We call the objects.
One of them is in array. Can you check up here? Let me see something.
No, it works.
All of them were, I mean, up there.
Yes.
Okay.
Let's just add maybe the age property and let's see if it will be.
If it overwrite, yeah.
Yeah, it override it, yes.
Let's see if it's 50.
Yeah, so age.
Override, yeah. Okay.
It's override it, yeah. So.
Yeah,
so it's override it.
Override the first one.
Yeah, so assuming you set maybe is married, right? You set it to true.
So it's because it has the same property name.
Property, last one will override the first one.
Exactly.
Yeah. Sure. All right. So George, thanks for a nice catch. I think George yeah. So now it works, right? So when you're using the spreading and the objects has the same properties, it will overwrite properties. What you are spreading last will be the one present, right? Yeah. So nice catch, George. So now the rest operator, right? The rest operator. So this now when we call something like this, let's say const, right? It's just like the spread operator. So we know that when we have the objects, right? So assuming we have this object, did I delete the objects?
They're all there.
Yes. So now, okay. So now we join these two objects. So now I'm using the rest, right? Rest operator. We can just use const and have, let's say, this and give it, assign it to the objects, the main objects, right? Sorry, the main objects like this. Now we can just do this. Let's say we had name, right? So we can just destructure name and do the age and do, let's say, the location, right? Location. Now let's call the rest, right? Others, right? Others. Now let's console.log the name. So let's console.log name. We have George, right? So let me copy this and let's console.log the location. Then let's console.log the others, right? Now you see the rest operator will just assign the rest of the objects to what we use. It is similar to the spreading operator. So there's the rest, right? It's just like we've destructured the name and the age and the location. Now we want to embed the rest in the others. So the rest is just like the rest of the properties in the array. We assign it to others by just spreading the rest using 3 dots and adding the name that we want to call it, right? I hope this is clear, right, William?
Yeah, it's clear.
Yeah. So the rest is just similar to the spread operator, but just when you're destructuring and when you spread it, is the rest operator, right? So the rest gets assigned to what you use the 3 dots in front, right? So we can just even destructure more. Let's call the gender, right? Gender, and we'll see that now the rest should be the is married and the location, right? So assuming you want to let's say spread it, but in a way have an object right, that you will use it to do something. You can just, assuming we had a list of objects, right? So assuming we are calling an API we are calling an API, right? Sometimes it has object in an object in an object, right? So you want to assign one particular, you've destructured and had access to some of the properties inside that call that with the data that we got back from the API. Now you can just use the REST operator to assign the rest of the data after you've destructured the rest of the data to so the rest, just the rest, right? So
it's
we can just, yes. So since this, right, is REST, so I think we can even use the map method on it, right, and do something with it. Yeah, we can just use the map because this is an object, so you can just use the spread operator, the REST operator on the higher order functions on this method, on this object, and do something with it. So I think if you're confused about anything, when you go through the video, you understand everything. All right. So thank you and catch you in the next tutorial. Bye.